Hey there, art nerds! So we have another Paperchild tutorial for you guys today. This is the second part of the Tanner as the Nutcracker Prince Paperchild. So this is a standing Paperchild. So it's a fairly simple design. The hardest part is going to be cutting him out. So you will find links down in the description below where you can print out the free line art as well as the colored version in case you don't feel like coloring him out. If you do print them out, I recommend you print them out on cardstock or heavier paper. The paper itself is necessary to give some stability to the standing Paperchild once it's completed. So if you haven't watched part 1, you guys can check that out. It's linked down in the description below as well as in the cards. In part 1, I just walk you through painting this one, and I did include a little sneak peek as well. So the materials for this Paperchild are pretty straightforward. You're going to need scissors. You may need an XActo Blade. You may wish to have some foam tape. You're going to need Popsicle Sticks or something else to give it some structure. You can use twigs if that's what you have. You're going to need some double-sided tape and some single-sided tape. If you have a tape runner, that'll also work. You could use a glue stick with this, but I would recommend you don't use like Elmer's glue or any really wet glues. So the first thing I want to do is I want to remove the excess paper from this. So I'm using a paper cutter to give me some really nice long straight cuts, and you're going to want to save the paper that you've cut away because we're going to use that to build the base in a little bit. Now you don't have to use a paper cutter. I just cannot cut a straight line to save my life, so for me a paper cutter is a little bit easier to use than an X-Acto Blade or a pair of scissors. This is also a together activity, so if you are a younger artist watching this video, you're going to want to ask an adult to help you out with the cutting and assembling parts of this tutorial. So go ahead and set aside those paper bits. We're going to need them in a little bit. I'm going to use an X-Acto Blade now to kind of fussy cut some of the islands of paper, so like that area in between his legs. This one is a little bit more challenging to cut out if you're going to do fussy cutting with this. So if you happen to have a Cricut or other die cutting machine, I would recommend using that with this particular Paperchild. It's going to make it a lot easier. Or you can do what's known as a halo cut, leaving a halo of white paper all around the Paperchild. I promise it's not that noticeable. Many of my earlier Paperchild designs utilize a halo cut, and when I take photos of them, you basically forget that halo of paper is even there. So, as I mentioned in most of these Paperchild tutorials, if you don't cut as fast as this, don't worry, neither do I. Segments of this video have been time-lapsed and sped up at different speeds just for time's sake, so I want you guys to be patient with yourself and with the illustration. I would recommend that any finer or smaller areas that you're going to do, you cut them with the X-Acto Blade before you start cutting out the larger areas with the scissors. Leaving this rim of white paper gives some additional stability to what you're cutting, and it makes it a lot less likely to tear. I also noticed that I started picking up some of the red watercolor pigment on my hands as I was handling this piece. You may want to work with a buffer piece of paper between your fingers and the paper itself before you start using an X-Acto Blade, particularly if you're going to be holding the paper in place while you're cutting it. So next I'm using a pair of scissors just to trim off the excess paper to make it a little bit easier to handle this. Now that I've got the excess paper trimmed, I'm going back in with my X-Acto Blade and doing a little bit more fine cutting or fussy cutting. So here's a mistake I'd like for you guys to avoid. Don't cut between his legs as early as I did. It ends up really messing up the stability of this piece and made it a lot more difficult to handle and to cut without tearing it. Cut everything else and then go between the legs and cut that paper out. Alright, now that your Nutcracker is all cut out, the real fun can begin. So I grabbed my excess paper scraps, my double stick tape, my single-sided tape, and my popsicle sticks. And if you don't happen to have popsicle sticks, they sell them at Walmart, they sell them at Dollar Tree, or you can just use sticks from the yard, or any like plastic utensils would also work, or chopsticks, just something that's going to give it a little bit of structural stability down the back. So speaking of structural stability down the back, we are going to start by creating the base. And watching this and narrating this in post, what I would actually recommend you guys do is I would actually recommend you attach the popsicle sticks at this stage rather than attaching the base. But I used a rectangular piece of scrap watercolor paper to create kind of a little, not cardboard, my brain wants to say cardboard, but I don't mean cardboard, a little base to help him stand. We're going to be using a triangular base for this Paperchild illustration, similar to what we've used in the other standees. So now I'm applying some double stick tape to our popsicle sticks. If your double stick tape is a little bit wider than your popsicle stick, you can just fold it over. And I am pressing firmly to make sure the popsicle stick adheres to his back. I'm going to use one for each leg. Then I'm going to make one to go across his pelvis, and then one that goes up his back, since he stands so tall. So now that he has a spine, let's go ahead and start building our base. We're going to need more of that scrap watercolor paper, and I have just folded it in 3, with one end being a little longer than the other end so that I can fold that over, and this is going to make a sturdier triangular base. And I used a little bit of double-sided tape to tape that together, and now I'm using some of the single-sided tape to tape down the flap. Now since we put popsicle sticks in for his back, you're going to get kind of uneven attachment points where the paper meets the paper, so we're going to use the foam tape to kind of help with this. And you can get this foam tape down at Dollar Tree. It's double-sided, so it's sticky on both sides, and it's basically going to help fill the gaps that the popsicle sticks create. Once I've applied that, I'm kind of trimming the base down a little bit. We don't need it to be quite so big. Now it fits the triangular base a little bit better. So now we're going to create a bottom for the base because we need to put some weights in this so that it will counterbalance. So I took one of the scraps of watercolor paper, one of the corner scraps, I measured it, and now I'm cutting it down to size, and I'm going to tape this to the bottom of our triangular base using our single-sided tape. So I apply some to the bottom of our base, and you can see I just slide it over and wrap the tape around. And I'm just going to continue to do this on the bottom, and then I'm going to do it from the top, making sure to press firmly so the tape actually adheres to the paper. And this is going to create a pretty secure base. Now for the weights, you can use any small heavy object. You can use pebbles, you can use shells. I'm using pennies here, and I am using 3 pennies, stacks of 3 pennies, so 9 pennies total. And I'm wrapping them in the single-sided tape so that they'll all stick together. If you want to, you can glue your pennies in advance, but the tape works just as well. So I'm making little penny parcels, and then I'm going to use some single-sided tape to tape them into place. I'm going to put one parcel in the corner furthest away from the figurine. That's going to counterbalance the weight of the Paperchild. And then I'm going to put a couple of parcels on either side of that. I'm using a little bit of the single-sided tape just to kind of secure things a little bit more and add a little bit more security so that hopefully it doesn't fall apart while it's just standing. I do have a tendency to over-engineer my paper children though. Alright, so this is our triangular base without a bottom. You can see the little wooden spine that we've created pretty clearly here. You may want to reinforce that arm as well as the sword. Here's a close-up of the base. You can use a toothpick glued to the back of the sword to give the sword a little bit more stability. And then here's the bottom of the base before we've attached the penny weights. I think our little Nutcracker prints turned out really cute. Didn't take too many materials, and it utilized techniques we're already pretty familiar with. So I asked Joseph to help me find a good place for our little Nutcracker prints, and this guy's kind of tall. He's about 10 inches tall, so you want plenty of headroom for him. So Joseph chose the second story on the shelf underneath the little candy cane thief. So you can see Tanner just kind of chilling out here on the shelf. So I hope you guys enjoyed this Paperchild tutorial. If you did, it would be a huge honor if you would share it with some other people who are looking for a holiday-inspired activity to enjoy. And I'd love it if you checked out some of the other Paperchild tutorials I've created during Advent. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy holidays!